We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Beis Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 32b. On the previous summit, the Gemara asked, in our mission it says that Dinei Mamanis, there is Drisha v'Chakira, there is examination of the witnesses, but the problem is, if that's the case, why is it that by Shtorei Chov, if they are Me'ucharin, if they're post-dated, that's fine. That would seem to indicate there's no examination of the witnesses, because the date on the shtar could be wrong. It could be a post-dated document. And the Gemara is bringing now the first answer to this question. This is the answer of Rabbi Chanina, and the answer to the question is that really on a Doraisa level there is Drisha v'Chakira by Dinei Mamanis, but if there was Drisha v'Chakira, the Rabbanan realized that people would hesitate to lend money. To encourage people to lend money, we say we waive that requirement. There is no Drisha v'Chakira when it comes to Dinei Mamanis. And the Gemara now asks, if that's true, so then Tohu lo yishlamu, so then if the court makes a mistake, they shouldn't have to pay for that mistake, because they weren't able to really do a proper investigation. And the Gemara says, no, they do have to pay, because kol shekain shetinol delis bifnei love. And if you're going to say that they don't have to pay for their mistakes, then for sure the door will be closed to borrowers. No one's going to want to lend money if the court is not held responsible for their mistakes. And the Gemara continues with a second answer. Rava Amar, Rava says, Masnisin dahacha, our mission over here, which says there is Drisha v'Chakira, that's bedinei knossos, that's talking about cases that involve knas, that involve fines, v'idach, but the other, meaning when it says that a shtar chov, for example, can be post-dated, that's behodos v'alvos, those are cases that involve admissions or loans, meaning to say, basically, they involve loans, and we don't want to close the door before the borrowers, and so therefore, by hodos and halvos, we say that Drisha v'Chakira is not required. The idea of using the term hodah, really hodah also is talking about a loan. It just means to say that we're resolving the case by bringing witnesses that saw the admission, and halva means that we're resolving the case by bringing witnesses who saw the actual loan. But the point is, again, by loans, we waive the requirement of Drisha v'Chakira in order to encourage people to lend. And the Gemara continues with a third answer. Rav Papa Amar, Rav Papa says, Idi v'idi behodah v'halva. Both are talking about behodah and halva, meaning to say both our Mishnah, which indicates that there is Drisha v'Chakira, and the idea of Shtarei Chov HaMeucharin, which indicates there is not. And what's the distinction? Kan bedin meruma, kan bedin she'eno meruma. In one case, we're talking about a din meruma. Rashi explains, meruma shebezin makirin betovei hazeh. Meruma means that Bezin recognizes this person making the claim, shehu ramai, that he's a ramai, he's somebody who might be lying. Umavinim tainus ramai b'dvarav. They understand some kind of ramaos in his words. So by a din meruma, where they suspect that something is wrong, then we do Drisha v'Chakira. That would be our Mishnah. But in general, if it's not a din meruma, then there is no Drisha v'Chakira. Kid Reish Lakish, like Reish Lakish says, the Reish Lakish Rami, because Reish Lakish had the following contradiction in Psukim. Ksiv, it's written in one pasuk, B'tzedek tishbon amisecha, that you have to judge B'tzedek, you have to judge with righteousness, with justice. Uksiv, and it's also written Tzedek, Tzedek tirdof, it says the word Tzedek twice, which sounds like there's a higher level of Tzedek that we have to pursue. Hakeitzad, how so? Kan bedin meruma, kan bedin she'en meruma. It depends if we're talking about a din meruma. Again, if there's a reason to suspect that something is wrong, then tzedek, then you have to do a real full investigation. But a din she'en meruma, then it's just b'tzedek tishbot amisecha. And Rashi explains b'tzedek tishbot v'lo ksiv b'tzedek tzedek. It doesn't say tzedek. It doesn't say tzedek twice in that pasuk. Lahazir bezin ledaktik bo kol kach lidrosh v'lachkor. Tzedek would imply again that there's Drisha v'Chakira, that they're doing a full examination. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Rav Ashi says, Masnisin Kiddushanin. Actually, our Mishnah, you can give any of the answers we gave above. And Kroi, but when it comes to the contradiction in Psukim of B'tzedek Tishbot Amisecha and Tzedek, so Echad L'din v'Echad L'pshara. It says Tzedek because it's saying, but both by cases where we're paskening through din, where we're paskening that one party is correct, and pshara, sometimes you pasken and you issue a ruling that is a compromise. In both of those cases, you have to use tzedek. In Itanya, as we learned in a brisa, tzedek tirdof. Why does it say tzedek twice in the pasuk of tzedek tirdof? Echad l'din v'echad l'pshara. One is saying there has to be tzedek by din, and the other one there has to be tzedek by pshara. And the brisa continues, Ketzad how so shtei sfinos ovros benohar. Let's say you have two ships that are passing in a river. It's a narrow river, upaguzeh bazeh, and they meet one another. Im ovros shtein, if they both try to pass, it's too narrow. Shtein tovos, they're both going to sink. Bazeh charzeh, but if they go one after the other, shtein ovros, then they'll both be successful in passing. V'chein shnei gemalim, and similarly, let's say you have two camels. Shayu olim b'malos beis choron, that are going up the ascent of beis choron, also very narrow. Upagu zeh bazeh, they meet one another. Im olu shneihen noflin, if they go up together, they're going to fall, it's too narrow. Bazeh charzeh, if they go one after the other, shneihen olin, they'll be successful, both of them in going up. So how do we determine who goes first? Hakeitzat, so how? So te'una v'she'ena te'una. Let's say, for example, you have one animal with a load on it and the other animal has no load. Tidcha she'ena te'una mipnei te'una. So the one with no load should wait and the one with the load should go first. Krova v'she'ena krova. Let's say you have one that the destination is close, the other one the destination is not close. Tidcha krova mipnei she'ena krova. The one that's destination is close should be pushed off, should wait until the one who has a further destination. Hayushtein krovo, shtein rechokos. Now, if both of them are the same distance, close, or both of them the same distance in terms of far away, so then hatil peshora beinayim, so then you have some kind of compromise, umalo schar zulazu, and whoever has to wait, he'll be compensated, the other one will pay him any money for his loss. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, the Pasuk says again, you have to pursue justice. Halach Achar Bezdin Yafa, you have to go after a good, a respected court. Achar Rabbi Eliezer Lalud, after Rabbi Eliezer to Lud, Achar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Livror Chayil. After Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to Baruch Chayil, those were respected courts. And the Gemara continues, Tana, it was taught, Kol Rechaim Beborni, if you hear the sound of a millstone in Borni, Shavua Haben, Shavua Haben, that's like an announcement that there's a Shavua Haben, which is a way of saying there's a bris Mila. Or Haner, if you see a candle that is lit before Chayil in the city of Baruch Mishtasham, that's like an announcement, there's a feast, a wedding feast over there, a wedding feast over there. And Rashi explains, Shavua Haben, Siminhu, it's a sign, Sheyesham Bris Mila, that there's a Bris Mila there. Kemachriz V'yomer, it's as if an announcement is being made, Shavua Haben Kan, there's a Shavua Haben, which is another term for Bris Mila, there's a Bris Mila over here. V'harechaim Simin L'shchika Samimonim, the reason why this is a sign for that is a millstone is like a sign for Shchika Samimonim, when they would grind up in order to make Samimonim. Samimonim were used for medicines and things like that. Lamakas Hatinok, that was for the wound. They would use these Samimonim for the wound on the child. V'shas Kazeres HaMalchus Shagazr Shalom, this was a time when the governments were decreeing not to have Bris Milah. V'hayo Yureim Lahotzi Kol V'kavu Simin Zeh, so they were afraid to announce explicitly that there was a Bris Milah, so instead they would have this sign, which was again the sound of the millstone. And similarly, Or Haner B'Vor Chayil, if you see the candle lit in Bor Chayil Biyom during the day, Oneros Nirim Harbe B'Layler, let's say there's a lot of candles at night, Siminhu, that's also a sign, Kemoshet Soik, as if the person is pronouncing Mishtasham, there's a wedding feast over there, a wedding feast over there. Bris Milah Kari Shavua Haben, Rashi says the reason why Bris Milah is called Shavua Haben, Al Shem Shu Sof L'Sof Shavua, that's because it's at the end of the first week that the child was born. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, again the Pasuk says you should pursue justice. Halach Achar Chachamim L'Yeshiva, you have to follow the Chachamim to their yeshivas, to their academies. Achar Rabbi Eliezer L'Lud, follow Rabbi Eliezer to Lud. Achar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai L'Baruch Chayil, follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to Baruch Chayil. Achar Rabbi Yoshua L'Fikian, follow Rabbi Yoshua to Pikian. Achar Rabbi Gamliel L'Yavna, follow Rabbi Gamliel to Yavna. Achar Rabbi Akiva L'Vnei Brak, follow Rabbi Akiva to Bnei Brak. Achar Rabbi Masio L'Romi, follow Rabbi Masio to Rome. Achar Rabbi Chananya ben Tradion L'Sichni, follow Rabbi Chananya ben Tradion to Sichni. Achar Rabbi Yossi L'Tzipore, follow Rabbi Yossi to Tzipore. Achar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira L'Netzivan, follow Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira to Netzivan. Achar Rabbi Yoshua L'Gola, follow Rabbi Yoshua to the exile, meaning to Bavel. And Achar Rabbi L'Beis Sha'orim, follow Rabbi to Beis Sha'orim. And Achar Chachamim L'Lishkas HaGazes, follow the Chachamim to the chamber of hewn stone that was in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Dinei Momenis Poschin V'chulu, when it comes to monetary cases, we can begin deliberations either for innocence or for guilt, but when it comes to Dinei Nefashas, you have to begin the deliberations with a pronouncement of innocence. And the Gemara says, Hey Amrin, and what exactly do we say? How do we begin the deliberations when it comes to Dinei Nefashas? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda says, Hachi Amrin and Lahu, this is what we say to them. Mi Yemer Kedukamri, so who says that what you're saying is really correct? We tell the witnesses, maybe what you're saying is false. Amar le'ula, so Ula said to him, but if you do that, you're going to muzzle them. They're not going to want to talk at all. But the Gemara says, but let that be the case. Let us silence them. Milo Tanya, didn't we learn a brisa? Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer, Omer, that Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer says, we walk the witnesses around from place to place, so they get confused, and they retract. And so you see that we do things to encourage the witnesses not to really testify to this person's guilt. But the Gemara says, Mi Dami, can you really compare the two things? Hasam memela kamidchu, when you're walking them around, so then memela, it happens along the way automatically, so to speak, that it pushes them off. But over here, kadachinan lahu biyadayim, we're actively pushing them away, we're actively silencing them. That we should not do. And the Gemara continues, Ella rather, Amar Ula says, Hachi Amrin, and here's what we say. Yesh lach eidim lahazimam, we say to the person, the defendant, do you have witnesses that can falsify these witnesses? That's how we begin the deliberations, tilting towards innocence. Amar le Rabba said back to him, V'chi poschen bezechuso shel zeh, shi chovaso shel zeh, do you think we're going to begin the deliberations for this person's innocence, which will end up being the guilt of the witnesses? Because when it comes to Eidim Zomim, and if Eidim are falsified, they themselves are given the punishment that they tried to give to the defendant. That's chovasam. That's going to be something to their detriment. Would we begin deliberations to their detriment? But the Gemara continues, "Umi have chovasam," but is it really to his detriment? Is this really to the witness's detriment? But we learned in a Mishnah, Ein Eidim Zomin Neheragin. Eidim Zomin are not killed at Yigmar Hadin unless you already had reached a verdict. Over here, we're asking at the very beginning of the case if there are Eidim that can falsify these witnesses, so they wouldn't get the punishment of Kasher Zamam anyhow, if we're going to bring those Eidim right away. And the Gemara says, no, Hachi Amina, this is what I'm saying. Ilu Shasakai, if this defendant would be silent, ad demigmar dine, until the verdict is reached, umaisi Eidim umazim luhu, and then he's going to bring witnesses that falsify the first witnesses, havalei chovaso shalzeh, that's going to end up being the chova of these witnesses. It's going to end up being to the detriment of these witnesses. And again, we would not begin the deliberations with something that could end up being chovaso shalzeh. And so the Gemara continues, Elo amar Rabba, rather Rabba says, Amrinan le, we say them as follows, Yesh lach Eidim lahachishan, do you have witnesses that can contradict these witnesses? If you have contradictory witnesses, so then the defendant is going to be innocent, but there's going to be no punishment to the witnesses. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Rav Kahana says, the way they begin deliberations is that they say, midivrechem, from your words, nizdake ploni, it does appear that so-and-so is innocent, and then they go on and they deliberate the case. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Abaye v'Rava da'amri tarvayu. Abaye and Rava, they both say, Amrin ale, we say to him, Ilo katal to lo sidchal, if you didn't kill anybody, you have nothing to fear. That's how we begin the case. Rav Ashi says, Kol mi she'odea lo zechus. We say as follows, anybody who knows a reason for innocence, for merit for this individual, Yavo v'yilmad olav, should come forward and should say the zechus. And the Gemara continues, Tanya kevase de Abaye v'Rava. We have a brisa that supports Abaye and Rava, that we say if you didn't kill anybody, you shouldn't be afraid. And where do we see that in the following brisa? Rebbe says, Im lo shachav ishosach v'im lo satis v'gomer. We say to the woman who's a sota, we say if you were not with any man, if you did not go astray. And so you see that we begin with innocence. And Rashi explains, Rav Kahana says, Kach poschen bezechus. How do we start the deliberations with zechus? La'achar kabol aseidus, after accepting the witnesses. Omer, he says as follows, Mitoch divrechem, from your words it seems, mizdake ploni, that so-and-so is innocent, meaning sofo lotses mi bezin zakai. It seems that in the end, he's going to leave the court innocent, lefira oseinenu. So that's what it seems to us. V'achar kach, and then after we say that, nosin v'nosin, so then we deliberate. And then it said by sotim lo sotis hinaki, if you did not go astray, so then you'll be innocent. And the point is, tchilas hatanai lezechus, the beginning of the stipulation that we state is lezechus, is for her merit. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph.